What do you call that feeling when you pour your heart into something, send it out into the world, and get silence? It's not quite rejection. It's not exactly disappointment. But it sits there, heavy and persistent. Today we're going to name it, and more importantly, learn what to do with it. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? This residue. Like holding a stone in your hand long after you've thrown it. You don't feel the initial impact anymore, the sharp release, but your hand still remembers the weight. I suspect you felt it. That subtle tension in your chest, the slight drag on your energy. It isn't quite sadness, not exactly disappointment. It's the echo of something almost being. An expectation, a hope, a connection, poised on the edge of existence, then not. We often call it rejection. A harsh word. A blunt instrument. But that feels incomplete. It assumes a simple transaction, offer made, offer refused, as if our efforts were merely commodities, assessed and discarded. It's something deeper than that, I think. A refusal of recognition. Not necessarily of you, but of the offering you made. A part of yourself, extended outwards, and met with silence. Or worse, dismissal. I've been turning this over in my mind a lot lately. This particular kind of ache. Because it seems to be a constant companion on the path towards, well, anything worthwhile. Trying to build something, create something, be something. You put yourself out there. You risk the exposure. You send the message. And sometimes, no one replies. It's tempting to immediately start picking at the wounds. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Was it something I said? A frantic inventory of failures. A desperate search for a fix. An attempt to control the uncontrollable. But I'm beginning to wonder if that's missing the point entirely. If the discomfort isn't about the rejection itself, but about the shattering of a carefully constructed narrative we've built around the sending of the message. A narrative that quietly whispers, if I offer enough, if I refine enough, if I become enough, then acceptance is guaranteed. That narrative is a fragile thing, isn't it? Elegant, perhaps, but built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works. Think of a seed. It offers itself to the soil. It extends a root, a shoot, a hopeful tendril towards the sun. But the soil isn't obligated to nurture it. The sun isn't beholden to warm it. There are droughts, pests, unfertile ground. The seed simply offers. It does what it is intrinsically meant to do. And its worth isn't diminished by whether or not it blooms. We're not so different. We're built to create, to connect, to contribute. We have within us an impulse to offer ourselves, our skills, our ideas, our affections to the world. But to tie our intrinsic value to the outcome of that offering, that's where the weight truly settles. That's where the unsent message, the unacknowledged effort, begins to erode something vital within us. It's easy to see this in other people, isn't it? A friend pouring their heart into a project that nobody notices. A colleague tirelessly advocating for an idea that gets shut down. We offer them empathy, understanding. We tell them their value isn't defined by external validation. Why is it so much harder to believe that for ourselves? I think it's because we're so conditioned to equate worth with achievement, with approval. We live in a society obsessed with metrics, with visibility, with the constant pursuit of external validation. This isn't a failing of you. It's a consequence of the world we inhabit, a current you're swimming against. So what do we do with the weight? With the echo? Not ignore it. Not suppress it. Not try to think positive and magically erase it. But to attend to it. To acknowledge its presence as a natural consequence of living a life that dares to extend itself outwards. And to begin, slowly, patiently, untangling ourselves from the narrative that makes that weight unbearable. I recently came across a passage by Albert Camus, the French philosopher. He speaks of the absurd, not as a pessimistic conclusion, but as a starting point. The absurd stems from our innate human desire for meaning in a meaningless universe. The clash between our longing for clarity and the silence of the cosmos. He doesn't propose we solve the absurd. He suggests we rebel against it, not by denying its existence, but by embracing the freedom it offers. To continue offering, to continue creating, even in the face of indifference. To find meaning not in the outcome, but in the act of offering itself. That feels closer to the truth. For the next few moments, perhaps, just allow yourself to feel the weight. Really feel it. Not as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as a signal. A signal that you dared to care. That you dared to reach out. that you dared to be seen. And that, in itself, is a kind of victory. Part 2. The hunger for a witness. The weight lingers, doesn't it? Even after acknowledging it, after naming it as simply the consequence of offering yourself to a world that doesn't owe you a response. It's not gone. And perhaps it isn't meant to be. I've been thinking about where that weight truly comes from. Not just the lack of a reply, but the deeper ache beneath the lack of a reply. It's not about needing approval, not precisely. It's about something more fundamental. It's about the hunger for a witness. From the moment we're born, we're seeking recognition. A mother's gaze, a father's smile. These early exchanges aren't simply about getting our needs met. They're about being seen. About having our existence acknowledged. Validated. That need doesn't disappear with age. It gets sublimated. It morphs into a desire for accomplishment, for status, for connection. We build lives, construct identities, chase goals. Often, I suspect, as a way of creating ever more elaborate signals, hoping someone, anyone, will finally notice. I remember a few years ago, working on a project that consumed me. It wasn't a grand endeavor, nothing that would change the world. Just a simple piece of writing. But I poured everything into it. Sleepless nights, endless revisions, a relentless pursuit of clarity. When I finally finished, I shared it with a small group of friends, hoping for, I don't know, feedback? Encouragement? A simple acknowledgement that I hadn't wasted my time? Most didn't even read it. A few offered polite, perfunctory comments. And then, silence. The disappointment wasn't about the quality of the writing. It was about the feeling of having spoken into a void. Of having created something, poured a piece of myself into it, and had it simply disappear. I spent days replaying the conversations, dissecting my approach, wondering what I could have done differently. But the truth was, their lack of response wasn't about me. It was about their own lives, their own preoccupations, their own internal worlds. But recognizing that intellectually didn't lessen the sting. Because at a deeper level, the rejection wasn't of the work. It was of the self that was expressed through the work. It's as if, for a fleeting moment, I had dared to believe that by sharing this piece of myself, I could somehow bridge the gap between my internal world and the external one. That I could be truly understood. And when that didn't happen, it felt like a confirmation of an old, insidious fear that I am, at my core, unseen. Do you recognize that fear? The quiet certainty that your true self, your deepest thoughts, your most authentic expressions will never truly resonate with anyone else? It's a paralyzing belief. It keeps us from taking risks, from sharing our vulnerabilities, from offering ourselves fully to the world. It whispers that it's safer to stay small, to blend in, to avoid the potential for rejection. But that's a slow kind of dying, isn't it? A withering of the spirit. A quiet surrender to the absurd. Camus wrote about this, too. About the temptation to succumb to despair in the face of meaninglessness. But he argued that true freedom lies in recognizing the absurdity of existence and choosing to live with passion and rebellion nonetheless. That rebellion, I think, starts with acknowledging our hunger for a witness. Not as a weakness to be overcome, but as a fundamental human need. But then, crucially, shifting where we seek that witness. We often look outwards to other people for validation. But what if the most important witness is ourselves? Not in a narcissistic sense, not in a self-aggrandizing way, but in the sense of cultivating a deep, unwavering self-awareness, of learning to hold space for our own experiences, our own emotions, our own creations, regardless of external validation. To see ourselves, truly see ourselves, with compassion and acceptance. To validate our own existence. To be the witness we've been searching for all along. This isn't about pretending rejection doesn't hurt. It's about building a foundation of self-worth that isn't contingent on the opinions of others. It's about realizing that your value isn't determined by whether or not someone replies to your message. It's inherent. It's intrinsic. It's simply because you are. I'm not suggesting this is easy. It's a lifetime of work. A constant practice of self-compassion and self-acceptance. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the weight feels unbearable. But I believe it's the only path towards a life of genuine freedom and authenticity. A life where we can continue to offer ourselves to the world, not out of a desperate need for validation, but out of a joyful expression of who we are. For now, consider this. What is one small act of self-witnessing you can practice today? Perhaps it's simply taking a few moments to sit in silence and acknowledge your own thoughts and feelings without judgment. Perhaps it's writing in a journal, expressing your innermost fears and desires. Perhaps it's engaging in a creative activity simply for the joy of it, without worrying about the outcome. Choose something small, something manageable, and commit to doing it, not for anyone else, but for yourself. Because you deserve to be seen, even if the only one doing the seeing is you. Part 3. The Cracked Pot and the Quiet Offering. Imagine an old, earthenware pot. Not one of those perfect, pristine pieces you find in a gallery. This one is flawed. A hairline crack runs down its side, a remnant of a forgotten mishap. It leaks. It's imperfect. Most people would discard it. Replace it with something new, something seamless. Something that performs as a pot should. But what if this cracked pot still holds water? Not as much, perhaps. Not as efficiently. But enough to nourish a single flower. Enough to offer sustenance, even with its imperfections. I think we're all a little like that pot. Cracked, flawed, leaking in places. We carry our wounds, our insecurities, our past failures. And we're often tempted to hide those cracks, to present a polished, unblemished surface to the world. But it's in those cracks, in those vulnerabilities, that our true beauty resides. It's in those imperfections that our authenticity shines through. Because to offer yourself to the world, to share your work, your ideas, your affections, is inherently an act of vulnerability. It's stepping into the arena, knowing you might be hurt. It's extending a hand, knowing it might be brushed aside. And the fear of that hurt, the fear of that rejection is a powerful force. It constricts us. It silences us. It keeps us from taking risks, from pursuing our passions, from living fully. I observe it in myself constantly. The internal editor that kicks in the moment I consider sharing something truly personal. The voice that whispers, they won't understand. You'll be judged. It's better to stay safe. It's not a rational fear, of course. It's a deeply ingrained protective mechanism, born out of a long history of social conditioning. We've been taught to prioritize acceptance, to conform to expectations, to avoid standing out. But what cost does that come at? What potential remains unexplored when we constantly suppress our true selves? Think of the things you haven't done, the words you haven't spoken, the creations you haven't shared, out of fear of judgment. It's a vast, silent landscape of unfulfilled possibilities. I've been reading about the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of disguising the cracks, they're highlighted, celebrated as part of the object's history, its unique beauty. It's a powerful metaphor for our own lives. Our wounds don't diminish our worth. They add to it. They make us who we are. They are the gold that illuminates our stories. But acknowledging that intellectually is different from feeling it. It requires a different kind of courage. A quiet, internal courage that doesn't seek external validation. A courage that simply says, I will express myself, regardless of the outcome. These moments often aren't grand gestures. They're subtle shifts in behavior, small acts of defiance against the voice of self-criticism. Maybe it's sharing a painting you're afraid isn't good enough. Maybe it's voicing an opinion that goes against the grain. Maybe it's simply acknowledging your own vulnerability to someone you trust. These seemingly insignificant acts are, I believe, profoundly important. They erode the power of fear, expanding the boundaries of our comfort zone, slowly but surely. And that's where the idea of creative resignation comes in. It's about accepting that you cannot control how others will respond to your offerings. You cannot force them to understand, to appreciate, to acknowledge your worth. You can only control your own actions, your own willingness to show up, to create, to offer yourself, even in the face of uncertainty. It's not about apathy. It's not about giving up. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of expectation. It's recognizing that the act of offering itself is its own reward. Because when you detach your sense of self-worth from external validation, you unlock a new level of freedom. You become less concerned with being accepted and more focused on being authentic. Right now, consider one small creative act you've been hesitating to undertake. It doesn't need to be monumental. A phrase you want to write, a song you want to sing, a conversation you want to start. For the next hour, just hold that intention. Don't force it. Don't pressure yourself. Simply allow it to sit with you, without judgment. And then, when the time feels right, take one small step towards bringing it into being. Not for anyone else, but for the cracked, beautiful pot that you are. Because the world doesn't need another flawless imitation. It needs your unique, imperfect, vulnerable offering. Part 4. The Gardener and the Stone. Remember that initial wait? The residue of an unsent message, the echo of an unacknowledged offering? It likely hasn't vanished entirely. And that's okay. It's not something to be fixed, but a current to navigate. I've been thinking about gardens, about the countless seeds a gardener sows, knowing that not all of them will sprout. Some will fall on barren ground. Others will be eaten by birds. Still others will wither and die before they even have a chance to bloom. But the gardener doesn't take it personally. They don't see each failed seed as a reflection of their skill or worth. They simply acknowledge it as part of the natural process. They continue to sow, to nurture, to tend to the garden, trusting that eventually something will grow. Life, I suspect, is a bit like that. A vast garden of possibilities filled with both potential and uncertainty. We sow our seeds, our ideas, our creativity, our affections, hoping they'll take root. But we can't control the elements. We can't guarantee a harvest. And when things don't go as planned, it's easy to fall into despair, to question our choices, to doubt our abilities, to feel like we've wasted our time and energy. But what if we shifted our perspective? What if we started to view rejection not as a failure, but as simply information? A data point, a signpost, a gentle nudge towards a different path. It doesn't erase the pain, of course. It doesn't make the disappointment disappear, but it does shift the narrative. It moves us away from self-blame and towards self-compassion. Imagine a friend came to you, heartbroken after a rejection. Would you tell them they're worthless? Would you tell them they should have tried harder? Would you tell them they should have anticipated the outcome and avoided putting themselves out there in the first place? Of course not. You would offer them empathy, understanding, and encouragement. You would remind them of their strengths, their talents, their inherent worth. You would tell them that rejection is a part of life, and that it doesn't diminish their value. Why is it so much harder to extend that same kindness to ourselves? I think it's because we hold ourselves to an impossibly high standard. We believe that if we're truly good enough, truly deserving, we should be immune to rejection. But that's a fantasy, a dangerous illusion. True strength isn't about avoiding rejection. It's about learning to navigate it with grace, resilience, and self-compassion. It's about recognizing that our worth isn't defined by external validation. It's inherent, intrinsic, and unshakable. And it's about finding meaning not in the outcome of our efforts, but in the process itself. In the act of creating, of connecting, of offering ourselves to the world, regardless of the response. Camus spoke of imagining Sisyphus happy, condemned to endlessly roll a boulder uphill, only to have it tumble back down. Not finding freedom from the task, but freedom within it. Accepting the absurdity and finding meaning in the effort itself. That's a powerful idea. To embrace the inherent imperfections of life, to choose joy in the midst of struggle, to continue to create and connect, even when the world feels indifferent. I've learned to think of it like this. The stone doesn't care if you roll it. The flower doesn't care if you tend to it. The universe doesn't care about your ambitions or your failures. But you care. And that is enough. For now, I invite you to simply rest with this thought. To allow yourself to feel the full range of your emotions, the disappointment, the frustration, the sadness, without judgment. To acknowledge your vulnerabilities, your imperfections, your inherent worth. To remember that you're not alone in this. That countless others have walked this path before you, grappling with the same fears, the same doubts, the same yearnings. And to trust that even in the midst of darkness, there is always the possibility of growth, of resilience, of quiet, unwavering beauty. This isn't a destination, but a practice. A continuous unfolding. A gentle, persistent return to the truths we've explored together. A reminder that you are worthy, not because of what you achieve, but simply because you are. And perhaps, in the quiet spaces between the striving and the hoping, you will find a peace that isn't dependent on the replies you receive, but on the courage to send the message in the first place.